Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo and you're watching Tazawa Tanks. So recently I did a review on a canister filter. It was the Owazu canister filter that was previously in my my female peacock tank, and then I did move it to Oscar's tank over here. At the end of that video I talked about a new filter that I was excited to get in the mail and test. And I have it now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So by this point, I'm sure that you guys have heard the hype about the Ziss Bubble Filter. It's been featured on Aquarium Co-op's channel. It's been featured on Bob Steenfocht's channel and a few other channels as well. So if you're not familiar with the Ziss filter, it is a moving media filter or a moving bed filter. So essentially what that means is the body of the filter has a bunch of media inside of that, and that media floats. And as you connect air to that filter, the bubbles will rise and it will circulate the media that's in that filter. And what happens is beneficial bacteria lives on that media, and so as the water passes through, as it's lifted by the air, the beneficial bacteria that is living on the media is able to help to break down the waste and help the water go through the nitrogen cycle, so that you're just left with nitrates at the end of that cycle. What excites me most about the filter is a couple things. So you guys know that I love sponge filters. I love sponge filters for a few reasons, but mainly because they're really inexpensive to run because they're just run on air. And secondly, they're really easy to clean. And another reason is they're really inexpensive. Now the Ziss filter does a couple of those things really well. So it also runs on air, meaning that I could run this entire fish room on Ziss filters if I wanted to. Right now, pretty much the entire fish room is run on sponge filters, with the exception of that canister filter that I have on Oscar's tank. And then I do have a hang on the back on my Mbuna tank, and then I've got a small hang on the back that's just kind of a little testing on a little play tank right here on my stand. But for the most part, most of the tanks down here, I've got about 30 tanks in the fish room. They're all running on air, and most of those are using sponge filters. I do have one box filter. So back to the Ziss filter. So it does operate on air, meaning it's efficient. So you don't have to have electricity to run this. Well, you do need electricity to run your air pump, but you don't need multiple forms of electricity. So you just need to plug in one air pump, and then you can have multiple Ziss filters running on that one air pump. The other thing that I really like about it that is similar to sponge filters is that it is really easy to use and clean, but it's a lot easier to clean, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then the last part is the price. You know, sponge filters are really inexpensive. I buy a lot of my sponge filters from aquariumcoop.com, and they're usually like right around $8 or $9, $10, something like that for a sponge filter. The Ziss filter is $29.99, so it's basically 30 bucks. So it's about 3 times the cost of one sponge filter. You might be saying, well, 3 times the cost, that's not so great. Well, hang on a second. So if you have a lot of tanks, and I have a lot down here, as you guys may or may not know, so there's tanks all around me. If I were to put a Ziss filter in every tank, and if I were buying them, it could get quite pricey. So at 30 bucks a pop, if I'm going to do 30 tanks, do the math, that's $900 worth of Ziss filters. So it's a little bit cost prohibitive. However, if you factor in time and efficiency, it might make up for some of that cost. If you are spending a lot of time cleaning sponge filters, and you could better use that time to work on your business or whatever it may be, then it might make a lot of sense to have that Ziss filter, and that's why I'm really excited about it. So the one thing that I really don't like about sponge filters, and they are easy to clean, but I've got to clean mine all the time. So I have some messy eaters. I have a lot of cichlids down here that I power feed, so I'm feeding them a lot. Well, multiple times a day, small amounts, but multiple times per day, and I'm trying to grow them out quickly. I'm doing lots of water changes. So with a lot of my tanks, I'm having to clean the sponge filters very frequently because they get dirty, they get clogged, they're full of fish poop and detritus. Some of the other tanks, like my Planet tank and my Tanganyikan tank and stuff like that, they don't require as much maintenance on the sponge filter because there's not a lot of waste. So those can go several weeks, if maybe 2 or 3 months sometimes, without having the sponge filter cleaned. But for the majority of the filters down here, they need service frequently. If you saw the sponge filter that I had to clean for the Oscar tank, you can understand how yucky and gross they can be. But with the Ziss filter, you don't have to do that because it is a moving bed filter. It's a moving media filter. It's essentially self-cleaning. So anytime there's detritus or whatever that hits the media, it's moving around via air, so it gets knocked off and gets blown out. So the service on the Ziss filter is a lot less than on the sponge filter. Now, even though the Ziss filter is pretty new, I've had it in here for a few weeks now, actually. I've actually been able to not clean it. I haven't had to clean it at all. Now, I do have another sponge filter in here that I have had to clean, but the Ziss filter I've not had to clean. So there is a sponge in the bottom of it. So the bottom of the Ziss filter does have an intake sponge. I have found that I haven't had to clean that yet. I'm sure at some point in time I'll have to pop off the bottom and squeeze that out and clean it in some tank water. But I haven't had to do any maintenance on it. So what does that mean? That means that I like the filter a lot. I don't know as far as the filtering qualities, if I were to compare, the Ziss filter to a sponge filter as far as its effectiveness in breaking down ammonia and nitrites to create nitrate. I haven't done any scientific test or anything. That would take a lot of work where I'd have to take 2 tanks with the exact same amount of fish load, the same amount of food, the same amount of everything, water changes, light, etc. And then I would have to measure very specifically the amount of nitrates in one tank with, let's say, a sponge filter, and then another tank with a Ziss filter, and then put them through the exact same, almost clinical process, and then measure again. So I haven't done that, but I'm very confident that it is doing a good job. I have tested the water in here, and I haven't had any nitrate issues at all. And I have 0 ammonia and 0 nitrite issues. So eventually I would like to get a lot more Ziss filters down here. Now, Christmas is right around the corner, so I'm actually going to put the Ziss filter on my wish list to hopefully have under the Christmas tree. So if you don't see a bunch of Ziss filters in my fish room, or at least a couple more in the new year, then I guess I've been bad and Santa didn't want to bring me one. But otherwise, I'm going to ask my friends and family if they want to know what I want. I'm going to tell them, order me a Ziss filter. So anyway, if you guys want to know where you can get one, I will put a link down below on how to get one from aquariumcoop.com. And if you use the code Tazawa10, if it's your first time using the code, you will get 10% off of your order. So if you decide to order a Ziss filter, you'll get 10% off the Ziss filter. And if you decide to order a few more things, some Easy Green and some food and some, intake sponges or whatever, your entire order would be 10% off. So anyway, hopefully you guys get a chance to check out this filter. It's pretty cool. If you have air, it is something that I would highly recommend to use. Again, it does cost more than a sponge filter, but if you factor in the labor that you may have to endure with cleaning sponges all the time, it might be worth it. If you've tried this filter already, I'd love to read your comments down below and get your feedback. I have heard some people talk about the aesthetics of the filter and that, it's not as pretty because it does kind of have, the yellow balls, bubbling around. But I don't know. I kind of like it. It's different. And again, down here in a fish room, I don't really care. It's just kind of a fish room that, has a bunch of work tanks. And if I did put it in a display tank, I would simply just hide it behind a piece of driftwood or some rock or some plants, and it would be just fine. That's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.